Hello and welcome to the Spirit Vessel Conversation Series, Professionals, Perspectives, and Death Care. My name is Jessica Wirtz. I'm the founder of Spirit Vessel, and we're so glad you're here with us today. The Professionals, Perspectives, and Death Care series is centered around conversations with professionals of all types in the death care and emotional wellness space. These conversations aim to help bring awareness, acceptance, normalization to death and the grieving process. If you enjoy these conversations, please consider sharing them on your favorite social media platform and be sure to sign up for our newsletter so that you'll be the first to know when a new conversation is released. With me today is my sister and Spirit Vessel co-founder, Amanda McClellan, and we're joined by our guest, Lisa Pahl.
Lisa is a hospice social worker and ER crisis interventionist. She's been in the end-of-life space for 15 years, working primarily in hospice, and 8 years working in emergency medicine. Since obtaining her master's in social work from the University of Michigan, she's embraced a challenging but equally rewarding career working within the mental health industry in both the trenches of ER and within her true passion working in hospice. Her goal is to help people cope with illness, dying, and grief, with a passionate belief that peace at the end begins with meaningful conversations over time. She feels the more we can engage in talking about this difficult subject, the more prepared and ultimately comforted we will be when we reach the end of life. This belief led Lisa to be the co-creator of the Death Deck, a new party game that lets you explore a topic we're all obsessed with but often afraid to discuss. Lisa, thanks so much for being here with us today. We're looking forward to this conversation and learning more about the Death Deck and your work.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here and talking with you both today.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your story and what made you interested in your work and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. As you heard from my introduction or my bio, I received my master's in 1999 from the University of Michigan. And from there, I worked with several different populations, including trauma, domestic violence, survivors of torture. And then I moved to mental health and did in-home mental health services for children and youth in Los Angeles. After about eight to 10 years of working in those fields, I wanted to do something different. And I really enjoyed the in-home visits that I was doing, providing mental health services, but I was looking for a different path, a different way to support people. And I stumbled upon hospice and thought, okay, this is kind of an intimate home-based services here in Los Angeles that I can perhaps use my services for this population and assist people as they're dying. And within about a year, I had decided that this was absolutely where I belonged, and which was a wonderful feeling to just have something feel so natural and have a comfort in this difficult topic. And so from there, I ended up also working in emergency medicine. And I've kind of gone back and forth and done both at the same time. And I really enjoy the dichotomy of the two because emergency medicine is so fast paced, it's problem solving, it requires a lot of critical thinking and for me to be on my, be able to think quickly. And hospice is the antithesis of that. Hospice is primarily slow going and a lot of compassion and being able to sit with people and sit in silence and support people along the journey of both their own death and dying process, as well as the family members and support people. And then joined into all of that was a friendship that I developed with my friend, with a former hospice patient's wife. So early on in my hospice career, I had a patient named Joe, and his wife and 2 young children who were 2 and 5 years old. The wife, Lori Cicero, and I became friends after I stopped providing bereavement services for them. A couple years later, we reconnected. She told me she was writing a book. We got together, we developed a friendship. And from there, we realized that we both had this passion to help people be more prepared for end of life. Lori was young, her husband was in his early 40s, and they had never talked about what he would want at end of life if when that time came. And so we created the Death Deck as a tool to try to get people before they come onto hospice or before they have a medical emergency to be able to basically normalize conversations, as you two are doing, normalize conversations on death and dying and grief, start to help people get a little more comfortable with the topic so that then they can continue those conversations and do the important work of advanced care planning, making sure family members are informed of what their wishes are, and all of the other wonderful pre-planning work that people can do to make things easier when the time comes.
You took my next question out of my mouth. I was going to say, how did you meet Lori, and how did that all start? That is amazing. What a beautiful start to that in terms of your friendship and both just being passionate about wanting to help people have that conversation. I'm curious, what did that look like the moment one of you had that idea for a card game? Like, did that just develop over time, or was it a sudden, epiphany that that's what it would be?
Well, lots of different brainstorms. I'll give Lori the credit. She was the one who said, maybe we could make some cards. And so we started looking at kind of preparing people cards, which there are some great games out there that are conversation starters, like Hello, that game, and there's several others. And so we looked at those and we said, okay, these are great, but these are really touchy-feely, and we can't see anyone our age just picking these up and wanting to play this game. They're all for a purpose. And so we wanted to try to create something that was a little closer to a party game conversation starter that had a little humor, and we added multiple choice questions, because when Lori and I tried to play several of these games in our research, we really had a hard time coming up with answers on the spot. It felt like, you have to really be thoughtful, and it takes quite a bit of time. And we wanted something that, we could give people choices so they could say, well, this one's closest to how I fit in. And the other thing we wanted to do to try to make it more fun would be with the multiple choice questions, you can partner up and guess each other's answers, which is by far my favorite way to play. It is really fun watching family members and spouses and significant others try to guess each other's answers. They typically don't do that well unless they've really had a lot of conversations. We have found that female best friends or female close friends kind of usually win if people are playing for points, because I think in general women tend to talk more about some of these more in-depth conversations, and so those were some of the ways that we were hoping to lighten it up a little bit and make it more accessible for people out there.
I hadn't thought of that about the multiple choice until you mentioned that. But yes, if it was all open-ended questions, I would imagine that there would be some very thoughtful responses that might take a lot of time and decrease the party atmosphere.
Yes. And we have about 80-30 split in our, there's 112 cards in it. And so basically, there are the open-ended questions that may require more thought. Some are a little easier to come up with, but we always encourage people to stack the deck, because that way stacking the deck is, of course, like you would if you were gonna cheat in cards. But basically, you knowing your audience and trying to play to the people who will be playing the game. So the death deck is made for an array of situations. You know, the party game is one aspect. We also have a lot of death doulas and people in advanced care planning using the death deck for initiating conversations. I do use it with hospice patients, but I use select questions there as well. So we always encourage people to take a look ahead of time, but and decide what questions you think would be best, unless you feel unless you like the spontaneity of whatever comes up.
Nice. Do you have any particular, I don't want to say favorite, but like any cards that you particularly like because maybe you feel they help people think about things that they really haven't thought about before, or just any cards that stick out to you?
Yes. So one of the questions that I really like that's more related to grief is what is a scent that reminds you of someone who has died? And the reason I really like that question, and that's our open-ended one, but that question, almost everybody can come up with an answer within about 20 seconds because everybody has some kind, most people, never say everybody, but most people have, a memory, a scent of grandma. You know, cigarettes and gum is a common one that we get, or a specific perfume and that sort of thing. And as, of course, you know, people love sharing stories about the people that they are missing. And so, and opportunities to talk about grief. So that's one of my favorites. I also really like our questions that talk about all the different disposition options there are, because, you know, people pretty much just think about cremation and burial. They don't really think about what you can do with the cremated remains, and they don't necessarily think about, wow, now I'm blanking without the cards in front of me, all of our options that we have, but burial at sea and a natural burial and organic reduction and all of the wonderful new options that we have. I really enjoy kind of that our cards can help educate people as to what those are. You know, we hear feedback that people are playing the game and then they're doing a lot of Googling, you know, oh, wow, you know, I heard about this and I didn't know that you could have a full burial at sea. I didn't know you could do these things. So the education piece is really important to me. I value all of our cards that do that. I do like some of the party game questions that we have too. These are the ones that I'll play at my favorite wine bar and ask questions like, you found your dream house, but someone was brutally murdered in it, right? Will you still buy it? And what I love about that question is that it starts off really superficial, and then people start talking about ghosts and spirits and their experiences and their beliefs, and you know, an hour or two can go by as stories are shared from that question. So that's another one of my personal favorites.
That's really cool. I like that. And I can see that natural progression with that question as to how it would lead to that. So whether it's with the death deck or in your work, we're kind of curious, what are some questions that as an educator, what do you kind of wish people would ask you more about or had more knowledge of? Like, what do you get asked the most, do you think, that people are curious about when it comes to your work in hospice?
Well, the actual dying process, I think, you know, people really are, unless you've watched someone die, it feels scary, and it's so unknown. And so I really enjoy providing education on end of life symptoms and the ways we can manage those symptoms. Like like most hospices, we use Barbara Carn's books, Gone From My Sight and The 11th Hour. I find those incredibly helpful for just kind of giving the basics and helping people really understand what they can expect. I love when a patient themselves is asking me these questions. I've had people, I think it's very brave. I'm always trying to initiate the conversations, and it depends on the person and the family, how open they are to really talking too much. And of course, once someone is pretty ill, it's harder to have these conversations. It's more with the family. But being able to help people understand that dying is similar to giving birth, and that we go through these phases, we go through these processes. They may take different amounts of time, but this is typically what we expect, and kind of normalizing that and reassuring patients and families of what they can expect. I think there's a whole bunch of preparation stuff that I wish people, I think people know a lot, but they don't take action on. And so also one of my favorites is when someone has spoken very clearly with their family about what they want. I do my best to try to help them talk about some of these smaller things that maybe families wouldn't think about. Like, do you want, when you can't speak for yourself and when it's getting closer to the end, do you want people to come in and out? Do you want a lot of visitors or not? Do you want music playing, or do you want it quiet? Some of these questions to help people feel more prepared, to have the confidence that they know what their loved one would want, because a lot of the chaos and the stress comes from people not having confidence in their decisions that they're making on behalf of this person. So I think anything that we can do to help people feel more confident in those decisions makes for a more overall a calmer death for the person and the family and the grief process afterwards.
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. I actually ended up taking a doula course myself. I got certified, and it was so fascinating just to learn, because I felt like, wow, so much of this is really intuitive to being a human and tending to another human. And maybe some of us have to learn more things. And there were so many things I did learn just in what you're saying, like, okay, right, our senses are really heightened in certain ways, and other senses are really exiting the scene right now. So it was really just fascinating to learn about death in a way that I was never told and had never obviously experienced yet myself. So I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I'm curious too, I know you've seen a lot of death. You've been around, you've been in hospice for years and the ER, and a lot of what we're doing as Spirit Vessel is really helping to reintroduce ceremony and ritual back into the families to really help create these healing ways and healing spaces. How have you seen that really play out, or have you seen families partake in ceremony or ritual in hospice or ER?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the ER is more limited. Those are sudden deaths, and so I'll speak more about hospice because that's where we have a little more room for ceremony. I've had the opportunity to become friends and also take classes with Gabby Jimenez. I'm not of the Hospice Heart. She has a couple of great classes on rituals where she offers up rituals that she does with hospice patients. She's also a doula, so she's very creative, and so she's inspired me and helped me create more ritual in my hospice practice. Typically as a hospice social worker, we are rather busy, and so it just depends on how much time we can afford, but we do our best to spend whatever time is needed with the families. And just as a side note, our hospice that I work with has doulas as volunteers. So we are very lucky because we can also collaborate with the doulas, and they also help us bring in more ritual and more comfort at end of life. So just another plug for doulas. Hospices can use doulas. We're doing it. It's working beautifully. We're trying to get a paid position, which would be really exciting. So what I most recently, a ritual that I did, I find the rituals are very easier to make happen when it's a patient that is using medical aid and dying, because there is all these conversations, and there is this kind of setting the stage of how they want their death to be. I've used rituals in other settings, especially after death, but the one I'm thinking of in particular was with, and I'm going to give Gabby credit, because Gabby Jimenez, because she came up with part of this and I tweaked it. So I just want to give full credit. So basically there was a woman who wanted to choose medical aid in dying, and we had chosen the date, and her son and two grandchildren were going to be there, and her son's wife. Very small, intimate experience. And I basically had each of them choose embroidery thread, and they tied knots on each other, giving 4 separate well wishes and offerings of love. And so the woman who died had her bracelet on from each of the 4 people. So she died with these 4 handmade bracelets, and then the children and the son and his wife each had their own. And then the kids each had mom or grandma kiss a little rock that was shaped like a heart. And then I gave them a little box, and they put the box in their bracelet in the treasure box of grandma. And so it was doing these rituals, I think it always takes getting the family on board, educating, making sure they're comfortable with it. It's not our agenda, but making sure that they're comfortable with it. And my experience has been that families are always glad they did it. It just takes someone kind of bringing it up, suggesting it, and making it happen for them, because they don't have the capacity at that time. And so this was, it was very beautiful. It was, the kids were coming in and out, and they just kept opening their box and holding their little heart, and it just all felt much more powerful and intentional to have had that time together. And so those are the things that I love doing when families are able and willing, and then afterwards too. There's a lot of wonderful rituals that people can do in their grief, in terms of honoring people. Whether that's creating mandalas or collages. All of those I think are really incredibly valuable.
Yeah, you're really just, everything you're saying is just striking this chord in me. That's just like such a remembrance. Like, we all come from such creativity, all of our ancestors were creative. We've all created ways to hold these spaces for each other through the eons. And, when we remember in the simplest ways, it doesn't have to be grandiose at all, just to do that and hold each other in those spaces. And it can be with boxes and stones and string and thread. It's like the symbolism is so strong, and it just like brings everyone together in such a memorable way.
Mm-hmm.
Those little things, man, they just go so far.
That's so true. I think, sometimes I have a hard time reaching that creativity myself, which is why I'm always looking for resources, and I'm on Instagram and seeing what other people are doing to get inspired. Because I think the day-to-day grind, we can remove ourselves farther and farther from creativity, and it does kind of take the space to sit for a minute and be able to think. I find that exercise, walking, moving my body usually will help me create something if I'm thinking about a family and wanting to kind of prepare something special for them. I'll take a walk and try to get my body moving, and that helps me connect a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's something really true and wise to that. And that's one of my practices too, a creative practice. It's like if I'm feeling stuck, it's just like move your body. Things will move in, things will start to sway again. Yeah, well, I'm so curious too, because like this is so what we're talking about right now is just absolutely at the heart of what Amanda and I are doing with Spirit Vessel, which is helping people have creativity and feel that they have the agency to create what they want to in these really hard moments where they don't have the bandwidth to create something. And you know, you can find things online, you can create whatever you want, but having something succinct that you can offer somebody in that moment so that they can actually feel their own creativity and what will heal and help them is truly a gift. Well, I love your work. We just think it's the coolest idea of what you've done and putting it into a deck of cards. And it's just such an inviting and playful way to have these conversations get opened up again. And I would just love to see them in all hospice and, you know, everywhere people really need them, which I just feel like is everywhere. I mean, it's so easy to offer this as a gift. And I just think like, how many people do you know who have offered this as a gift to their loved ones and it has really helped them? Have you heard stories?
Yeah, yes. We have been fortunate enough to receive, people write reviews, people send us emails. And so that's been really fun. I've had experiences, like I said, I take the death deck out with me, going to breweries or wherever I am. I have it with me, and just depending on who's there and what's going on, I'll pull it out and start asking people questions. And it really is everyone. There's the initial kind of look that they give of like, what, death deck? What is this? But all it takes is a question or two. People may say, oh, I don't want to talk about that. That seems really heavy. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a ton of stories. People talk over each other. They all want to talk about it because no one talks. I mean, people rarely discuss death and dying, and we all have our experiences and we have our thoughts and feelings. My 13-year-old, we developed this game when he was 10, and so he's been playing the death deck, and I have it out, and his friends come over and they're like, oh yeah, let's play that death game again, and so they go through it at 13, and so now there's this small group of 13-year-old boys wander around Torrance, California that are all aware about all of these disposition options, and which I think is it just warms my heart.
Yeah, why shouldn't that be common knowledge? That is cracking me up thinking of your son and his friends just like having these conversations in your living room while you're with them in the background.
He's at volleyball camp right now, just talking to kids about all this stuff.
What's their parents' reaction like? Do they are they allowed to keep coming over, or are they like
I haven't heard anything negative, so no news is good news.
Great, I'm sure they're going home and educating their parents.
That's my hope. Yeah.
Right? I can only imagine how many conversations you're starting just through this game and through this idea that are going to help people in such a long term, in such a profound way, and in their whole family unit. It is amazing the way that you've designed it to be so open.
That makes me feel great. This is certainly a labor of love. We Lori and I are both working. We hope that one day this will be our full-time business, but we both feel really passionately about helping people be more prepared and normalizing conversations on death and grief. And I'm just so excited about all the wonderful people who are doing similar things right now. It's a great people working in the death space, I have just loved getting to know so many people and collaborating with very kind, compassionate people. It really is an amazing field to be working in.
Yeah, it really is. And it's a field that's empowering people, right? Like the goal is to give agency and choice and empowerment back to people. And it's when you're working in that type of field that is so spirit led, it's hard to go wrong, right? Because you're like
Yeah.
feeding yourself as you're helping other people too.
Mhm.
I find it's a very symbiotic relationship in this type of work. I'm curious, one more question about the death deck. And so the topics that you have it designed into, do you really speak to emotional, mental, spiritual topics as well, would you say? Or is it really a little bit more factual based for choices?
Some of the questions do talk about emotional and people's values and beliefs. I would say that the majority is more, I mean, a lot of things are about their feelings, right? How would you feel about going back to that or living in that murder house? You know, there's a lot of emotionality involved. We are currently, we have done a redesign and we're creating a new deck that is the EOL deck, end of life deck. And this deck has a little softer imagery and is specifically for people at end of life and professionals working with people at end of life. And so in this smaller deck, which is in the works, will be out before the end of the year. And this deck is going deeper into some of those emotional, mental health, and spiritual end of life questions. And so we kind of started from more of a practicality, and now we're going to the spiritual, emotional side a little deeper. And some of those things that that I was sharing with you that people really want to know, like how many visitors do you want? What is the atmosphere? What do you want the feeling to be? What do you want a religious or a spiritual leader to be present? You know, all of these, again, kind of practical questions, but really get at the people's beliefs, values, what they want at end of life.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see where you'll be updating these version 2.0 soon on probably the first deck with so many options and choices. And
yeah, and we have a grief deck in the works. We've got lots in the works, so we're excited about trying to get more products out there, expansion packs basically of trying to just reach specialized populations and different topics, but all within the death and dying.
This is all you and Lori are doing all of this on your own, all of the research, all of the questions. Yeah, that's quite a bit of work, really.
It is a lot of work. Yes, as well as all the shipping and all those things. So it is it's a 2-lady job. That's more like a 10-lady job that we are just you know, working towards.
Passion driven. I love it.
Right.
Well, we're curious, and really, we're going to wrap up here in a minute. Curious, what is inspiring you right now regarding the direction of your work? And I know you just spoke to the second deck that you're working on. Is there anything else in conjunction with that, or other projects, or maybe even just where this field is going that you feel so inspired by?
I am greatly inspired by other people in this field. I have learned so much through, you know, working in hospice for 15 years or so. I've been working in end of life and been around it and kind of feel very comfortable in that. But until I started working with the death deck, I didn't feel totally inspired all the time. And creating the death deck and becoming, you know, being on Instagram and everywhere, seeing what other people are doing has just changed my entire career, because now I'm the one that's constantly presenting and emailing my team of hospice saying, you guys should know about this, you should know about this, and giving talks about, all of these options, because there's so much out there. And prior, I was feeling very fulfilled in my work, but it was kind of like clocking in and clocking out, with my day. And now it just feels like it's never ending, because I'm always curious about what else we can be doing, and looking for ways to collaborate and connect with other people who feel passionate like I do. And so I think it's a very exciting time in the field of death. And I think we have a lot to learn from young doulas, from people who are doing creative things within mortuary, do it yourself kind of. There's just so many people that I'm inspired by. It's a great time.
It's a great time. And I love how fulfilled you sound and how in the flow you sound when you're speaking of your work. It's very clear.
Oh, thank you.
Can you tell us where you can find your work and where they can purchase the Death Deck, and where they can find you on Instagram or even your website, whatever you want to share with us?
It's all at thedeathdeck.com. Thedeathdeck.com. That's our website. You can also purchase on Amazon. We are soon to have Australian distributors, and we do have a Canadian distributor. So we're trying to reach more international people so they don't have to spend $50 on shipping. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at the Death Deck.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure talking to both of you.
Yeah, likewise, Lisa. And as a reminder, if you enjoyed today's conversation, please share it on your favorite social media platform, and be sure to sign up for our newsletter at spiritvessel.com/newsletter so that you'll be the first to know when a new conversation is released. Thanks again.